Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. It's Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in the Marianas, and our guest today is here to help share insights that hopefully will set young people on the right path when it comes to dating. Malyssa Castro, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming to share your experience with us. Now, last year at the proclamation signing for this month, you were the inspirational speaker. Can you give us tell us a little bit about yourself to start?
Okay. So my name is Malyssa Castro, and so I have 4 children. My mom is from Tinian. My dad is from Guam. I live here on Saipan. I call it my home. I work at the college, the Northern Marianas College, and I love to share my story so that I can help others, teenagers. We were all once teenagers, right? And we think that we know everything. But yeah, that's really, that's what I am. And, honestly, I just like to take care of people and help people. So that is what I am.
Thank you so much. You're here because you've actually learned what a healthy dating relationship should look like, but your journey wasn't easy. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, definitely. I came from a family where my parents, they had the normal arguments, but I never witnessed them like hurting each other. Mm-hmm. And so, I just never thought that I would go into a relationship that was abusive. And again, in the beginning, I was 14 years old. I was in 8th grade, and I thought that I was in love. And, just like any other teenager, I think that when you start when you meet somebody and you just have those butterflies, you kind of want it to last forever.
Of course.
It's and so that's what it was. So I went into a relationship with somebody who was 2 years older than I was, and I loved everything about him at that time, but I never really paid attention to the red flags. But, I don't know what it was. I started at 14, and I went with the relationship all the way until I was about 23. So it was a pretty crazy journey. I remember the first thing that he did was he kind of told me that I wasn't able to wear certain clothing. I wasn't able to hang out with people that were my friends since we were 5 or 6. And so that was really hard for me because I was trying to figure out why is it that I have to stop talking to these people? Why is it that he thinks that that's wrong? And so, I thought about it, but I never thought of it as a red flag. At that time, it was oh, he cares about me. He doesn't want anyone else to take me away from him. I think that was the mistake right there. And that was when I was 14. I lived on one island, and then a typhoon hit really bad. And so I moved to a different island because to go, to start school again. And so that's what happened. And then, with that, it was a long distance relationship for quite a long time.
Wow.
But what's crazy is that I still was being controlled. At that time, and, let me just say, we didn't have Facebook or Instagram or, Snapchat. So he couldn't control where I was going based off of video or anything. But it was always I had to have my cell phone and my pager with me at all times. That was one of those things where I just thought was crazy. It was like that for a while. I think it was for long distance for about two years. And then, I decided to move away again. And so I remember we broke up for a little bit, came back together. But throughout the entire time, he was controlling what I was wearing, who I was speaking to. So I wasn't able to go to parties because he would ask me who it was for. And and who was going to be there. And just so that I didn't have to explain myself, I just decided I wasn't going to do it. But it's crazy because in high school is when a lot of these things happen. And I was, I think, 16 or 15, I think, when the first time he ever strangled me. And what was crazy about that was that I never told my parents. It happened, and the way it happened was, he went to play basketball. He came back, and he asked me if I knew somebody at the basketball court. And I said, yeah, I do know him. He's my classmate at school. And he was like, oh, I know that you've been doing stuff with him. He told me about this, this, and this, and that was not the case. And then I just remember his like the rage in his eyes, like he got so upset. And then I just remember him like having his arms around me, around my neck, and then I just blacked out. But I do remember like waking up, freaking out, because I was like, okay, this might be a dream. But I'm waking up, and he's like, touching my hair and saying, I love you. I'm so sorry. Like, don't talk to other guys. I would never do this again. And it was like, I remember thinking at that moment that it was bad. I mean, that was not okay, right? That's more than a red flag. He hurt me. But when he said he was sorry and he said that he wasn't going to do it again, I chose not to tell my parents. I literally, and the thing is, people would ask, oh, so where were your parents? But that happened in like a span of 15 minutes. Like, and then maybe 30 minutes after like waking up. But and my parents just happened to not be there. There was like a window. And I just chose not to say anything. And that was pretty, that was bad on my part. But at that time, I didn't think it was. And so, I was about, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. And then, we had a long relationship, and we just kept it always got worse, but it didn't happen as often, there were different scenarios that happened. And then after graduating from high school, I remember that was probably the worst time of my life. And my parents were like, you should just go to college and not worry about a boyfriend right now. And I remember telling them it's totally fine. I'll finish college and, I can have a boyfriend. And they didn't know the backstory of how he was. Because in front of people, he was very nice. Mm-hmm. He would always be so nice and charming in front of people. And then if I said anything, it was, when we got home, it would just be a whole different situation. Or even if we weren't together, it was like, later on, I'm going to make you pay for this. As in, ignore my calls, tell me that I can't hang out with my friends, or else he's going to break up with me. There were just so many instances that I should have looked at it as oh my gosh, it's a red flag. He's not the right person for me. And then, after high school, again, that was after high school, and then I had a baby at 18 years old, or almost 19, I gave birth to my daughter. And that, I think, for me, was a turning point to some extent. It was crazy because I still stayed with the person that I thought I loved. And it's always because when he said sorry, I believed him. I believed he wasn't going to do it again. So when I had my daughter, I was like, okay, this is great. This is somebody that we made. He's not going to hurt me. He's not going to hurt her. He's not going to hurt me. It's going to be great. And I think that that's the misconception. A lot of times we think that if we bring in a baby into a relationship, that would make things better. If a relationship is already unhealthy, it just gets worse. It doesn't get better. You throw one more human being into the mix, it makes it more chaotic, right? And so that was really crazy. But I think for me, one of the worst times in my life was when my daughter was maybe a year and a half, and he was upset at me about social media. This is when social media was new, and a cousin posted, "I miss you guys," and he never met this cousin. So he was upset because he was like, "Who's this guy and why does he say that he misses you? Did you do things with him? Are you cheating on me?" And that wasn't the case. I tried so hard to explain, like, this is my cousin. You don't have anything to worry about. I haven't even seen him in years. And then that at that moment, I remember he was so upset. And I remember him just punching my head. And my daughter was there. I mean, she was already walking, and she kept saying to stop, like, "What are you doing?" And he just kind of looked over at her and said, "Don't be like your mom." And, honestly, that broke me. Whenever I talk about that, it's the hardest thing, because as a parent, you never want for your children to see you weak. You don't want them to see you that somebody else can hurt you. You want to show them that you're strong, right? And I remember thinking at that moment, it hurt my heart that my daughter witnessed that. But it didn't. He still said he was sorry after, and you would think because of that I would have left, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that's an eye-opening thing. But I didn't. I stayed with him throughout the years. I mean, things would happen, he would tell me I can't talk to, like, my siblings even. Like, he'll say they can only come on this day and this day and this day when I'm here for an hour, and then you have to tell them to leave. He was upset whenever my mom and my dad would call, because he just felt like they were trying to control us. But he was the one controlling. So that, about maybe 2.5 years later, I gave birth to twin boys. And again, babies are blessings. I think at that point, though, I remember the boys being about 3 months, thinking, what am I doing? Like, my partner hurts me. Like, he physically hurts me. He belittles me. Like, he talked about how, like, I was always, like, he would always say stuff like, "You're fat, you're ugly, nobody would want you, nobody wants somebody with kids." And it was just a lot of different things that he was, like, brainwashing me with, telling me that I won't be anything if he wasn't part of this, like, this family or this structure. And I just remember, like, one day I was thinking about it for a long time. Like, I knew that I wanted to leave, but I just didn't know how, like, I knew, one thing people always said, why didn't you just pick up the phone and call your parents? And people think that it's just that easy. The fact of the matter, no matter what everyone says, people can be very judgmental. And it could be our families, our friends. And so I was just afraid. I knew that they would believe me, my family. I knew they would believe me, but I think that I wasn't ready for the judgment. I wasn't ready for them to tell me that I told you so, or, we knew you were so young to have a boyfriend, and this is what happened. And so I was very frustrated with that. But I remember just one day, he came home. My daughter was playing with his guitar, and he just got so upset. And he never hurt her, but he got so upset, and he was, like, yelling at her. And I'm like, you just came home from a whole day of work. Our daughter is here waiting for you, but you want to yell at her? Like, I wasn't okay, so we just kind of were arguing for a while. And then I remember I wanted to get up and just get my kids and leave. And I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And he just looked at me and he said, if you walk out those doors, don't ever come back. And I don't know what happened. I literally did that. I got up, took my kids, got their milk, their passports, and I walked out of that door, and I never turned back. And I'll be honest, that was one of the hardest things I ever did in my life, because I was making a choice to change something that I knew for about 8.5 years. That was so hard. It's all I knew since I was 14. But my parents, oh my gosh, I don't know what I would do without them. they are the reason I was able to fly back home with my 3 kids, and they helped us, but yeah, that was my story. And there's a lot more to it. Like, there are a lot of different times that things happen, where abuse happened, where the red flags were there, but I chose to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, he can change. But I learned later, in therapy especially, that you can't change anybody who doesn't want to change. And I learned that after the fact. But I, now I'm just so happy that literally was 12 years ago. And that, for me, just for myself, I'm so proud of myself to be able to say that 12 years ago I walked out, and it's definitely been a struggle, but I'm doing so much better than than I was back then, and so yeah, that's really right there. That's my story. Now I have 4 children. I just had a baby, and so I'm with a partner.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm with a partner who really treats me well. He respects me. He respects my children. And it's no relationship is perfect, but I definitely have asked for, I've prayed and asked for somebody to come in and just be there to support me. And I truly feel like my prayers were answered. And, he takes me in. He takes me the way I am. And so he knows that, PTSD is a real thing. It doesn't just happen to soldiers and, people who go to war, or it's really, PTSD is something that happens to people who come from traumatic relationships, like domestic violence, teen dating violence. And, my story, the biggest thing with that is I started as a teen dating violence relationship. That's what it started as. 14 all the way till 19, right? And then once I started living with my boyfriend, it became domestic violence, right? And so that's why I like to share my story, just because I hope that if I could help any, teenager out there, or any person who's, going through that, they could look at my story and say, if she could do it, then I can try and do it. It doesn't mean that everybody's successful. I always tell people this. Some people stay with their partners for 20 years in relationships that are abusive. And I never judge them, because everybody's story is different. Maybe for those 20 years, that's all that they can do, is take care of their children and make sure that they stay in a relationship that may not be the healthiest, but they're taking care of their children and their families. It's very different, I try my best not to judge. I know as humans we do that, and just because I don't think that everybody fits in the same shoe, like I was lucky that I had parents and a support system that was able to take 3 kids and an adult in with no experience, and little college, and house them, feed them. That's what my parents did for me, and I thank them for that, because lots of people that I've met throughout the years have said that sometimes they don't have the support. And that's why I think that the coalition is one of those places that are really good to get information. And I know that we'll get into that as well later, but yes, that is my story. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to ask, but
yes, let's talk a little bit more in the second half of the show about some signs of what is obviously you've shared a number about an unhealthy relationship and also a positive relationship. Yes. We'll be back after this break.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're talking today with Malyssa Castro about healthy teen dating relationships. Mali, I want to ask, you said you got into your relationship when you were 14. Do you feel you were mentally and emotionally mature enough to begin dating at that age?
That's a great question. No. If you're asking me now, I definitely look back at 14 being and thinking it wasn't. I don't think that I was emotionally ready. It's such a hard question to answer because I think that I feel like people should have fun and get to know people. I feel like you should date people so you can get to know them. But I think that we have to emphasize getting to know a person as opposed to falling in love with a person. And I know that when you start to get to know somebody, that's why the feelings start becoming like being in love, right? Or that feeling becomes in love. But I do think that at 14 years old, I don't know if it's the best thing for a teenager to say that they are in a relationship. I'm not 100% opposed to it, but again, I think dating and getting to know is a whole different story than saying I'm in a relationship, in love, and I'm going to live with you for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. That is really, what I think of it now. Especially, I have a daughter, and I feel like I am okay with her having somebody that she speaks to or talks to, gets to know. But I also feel like as a parent, it's my job to make sure that I talk to her. I feel like it's my job to kind of give her, guidance, yeah, and talk to her because, the reality of it, and I've watched friends where their parents will say, don't do this, and they do the complete opposite. And then everyone's like, oh, I taught her and this, and this. I taught him and this. But at the end of the day, everyone does what they want to do to some extent, right? And so, I feel like my job is to speak to my daughter, my sons, to let them know what healthy and unhealthy relationships are, what to look for in a person, like red flags. Those are things that I definitely speak to her about.
What are some of the top red flags that people should look out for?
Okay, so I think big red flag. If somebody tells you to stop talking to your friends, that's absolutely not okay. When you meet somebody, you want them to be able to have a relationship with the people that you are friends with already. They don't have to like each other, but I don't think they get to tell you who you can and cannot speak to. That's a red flag. Another red flag would be telling you what you can and can't wear. I mean, for me, I feel like everyone should be able to wear what they want to wear, provided you follow policies, right? But a partner should never tell you can't wear, a spaghetti strap shirt. They just shouldn't be able to tell you that. So that's controlling, that's power and control right there. Another, red flag would be the way they speak to their parents. I say this because from experience. I remember that, my partner was yelling at his parents as if it was normal. And I remember, I didn't think that was a bad thing back then. I don't know why. I mean, I didn't yell at my parents, but it wasn't a red flag. But I feel like it is a red flag because if he or she or whoever is able to speak to adults in a certain way, like yelling and disrespectful, then they definitely will do it to you as well. And so I think that's another big red flag. Yeah, those are probably the bigger ones that in teen relationships. I think those are things that you can look at. And then obviously the physical. If the person hurts you, then that's obviously a red flag.
And I think as far as a healthy relationship, you want to look for somebody who respects your boundaries, that you have good communication with, that you trust.
Yes.
And that doesn't do things that make you uncomfortable, basically.
Yes, definitely. If you can be yourself around the person, then I think that's a big, green flag.
Well, I want to talk a little bit before I give you time for final thoughts, just to mention the Marianas Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Violence. They are on Facebook. If anybody needs their help, they're a nonprofit, and their purpose is to raise public awareness about the impact of dating violence on young people, help young people break these negative cycles they get stuck in, and also encourage people in the community to step in and intervene, because young people sometimes can't do it for themselves, right? And they would also like the public to know they have a few events coming up to mark the month. Proclamation signing on February 7th at Tinian Junior and Senior High School, and where there'll be also some presentations there will be presentations at junior and senior high schools about this topic. And then also they're having an art, essay, and spoken word competition called Know Your Worth. And so whether you're a graphic artist or a writer or a performer, this is an opportunity for young people to participate in the conversation. And you can find all of that on Facebook at End Violence NMI. And I would like to thank Kiki Igatol Benjamin, the Associate Director at the Coalition, for helping us meet up today. Mali, can you give us your best advice before we go today?
Yes, definitely. I think for parents, I feel like if you could just speak to your children, ask them every once in a while how everything is going. If you do know that they're starting to speak to others, to partners, to whoever it is that they feel like they can have a relationship with, speak to them. Speak to them about the red flags, about what a healthy relationship is. Having communication is one of the biggest things that I, advise parents and teenagers. With teenagers, be open to listening to your parents. They've been there. They've been teenagers before. They may not know exactly how you feel because of the world we live in technology now. However, they are there to guide you. They want the best for you. They're not always your enemy. So just take the time to listen and learn a little bit from what they have gone through as well. And so just overall, if you know anyone who needs help for anything from, just they want to speak to somebody, they just want to talk to somebody or have somebody listen to them, please reach out. I always tell people I am open. You can find me on Facebook if you want to speak to me, or on Instagram, and just reach out to somebody that you trust or that you feel like you can speak to and trust that they are going to guide you and not judge you. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is just parents and teenagers to communicate with each other. Have an open communication, because both sides are trying to figure out if, the other wants to hear what they have to say. And try not to judge each other.
Our guest today has been Malyssa Castro, sharing her experience in helping towards the goal of creating healthier relationships for young people in our community. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.